Good evening. I'm Captain Marcus Brooks. After 28 years in the skies, I thought I'd seen every kind of passenger. I was wrong. Tonight's story didn't happen in my cockpit. It happened in Seat 1A on a flight from Atlanta to Los Angeles. But once you hear it, you'll understand why I couldn't stop thinking about it. This is the story of Flight 2214. The first-class cabin of Flight 2214 smelled like fresh coffee and warm towels, soft lighting, wide leather seats, the kind of quiet that money buys. David Coleman sat in 1A, a plain gray sweater, reading glasses pushed up into short graying hair, a worn leather notebook open on his knee. He looked like a man on his way to a quiet meeting. Nothing about him announced who he was. He preferred it that way. That was when Diane Whitfield stopped beside his row, boarding pass in hand, designer sunglasses pushed up on her head like a crown. "Excuse me," she said. "You're in my seat." David looked up calmly. "I don't think so." "This is 1A. I fly this route every week," Diane said, her voice sharpening. "I always sit in 1A. There's clearly been a mix-up, and I'd appreciate you fixing it." David held up his boarding pass without a word. She barely glanced at it. "Sir, first class is this section," she said slowly, like she was speaking to a child. "Perhaps your ticket is for economy." A few passengers nearby lowered their phones and magazines, watching. Nobody said anything. Nobody needed to. The silence in that cabin had its own kind of temperature, and it was dropping fast. A flight attendant hurried over, young blonde ponytail, name tag reading Kayla. "Is everything all right?" "This man is sitting in my usual seat," Diane said before David could answer. Kayla looked at David, his sweater, his worn duffel bag under the seat, his reading glasses, and made her decision in half a second, the way people do when they've been trained by habit instead of facts. "Sir, could I see your boarding pass?" David handed it over without protest. She glanced at it for less than 2 seconds. "There may be a system error. Would you mind moving to economy while we sort this out?" David's jaw tightened, just slightly. "The boarding pass says 1A. My name is on it." "I understand," Kayla said, in the tone people use when they don't. "But we have a loyal customer here, and I'd like to resolve this quickly before we hold up boarding." Diane crossed her arms, already victorious. "Thank you." David looked at her, then at Kayla, then out at the rows of watching faces. His phone buzzed once in his pocket. He didn't check it. "I paid for this seat," he said quietly. "I'm not moving." The tension pulled tighter with every second. A businessman in 2C lowered his newspaper. A college student 2 rows back lifted her phone and began recording, her thumb trembling slightly against the screen. Kayla called for backup. A senior flight attendant named Renee arrived, tall, composed, a clipboard under her arm. "What's the issue?" Renee asked. "This passenger won't give up seat 1A, Diane said quickly. "I've flown this route for years. Everyone knows me here." Renee turned to David. "Sir, can I see your identification and your boarding pass again?" David handed both over without hesitation. Renee studied them for a long moment, longer than Kayla had. Her eyes flicked up to his face, then back down to the name printed clearly on the pass. "This says David Coleman," Renee said slowly. "Seat 1A, confirmed." "That doesn't matter," Diane snapped. "I need this seat. I have a connection. I have back problems. I need the extra legroom by the window." "Ma'am, the seat is assigned to him," Renee said. Diane's face flushed. "Then reassign it. I'm sure there's something you can do for a loyal customer." Renee hesitated. That hesitation was the crack in the wall. Because Renee knew the truth already sitting in her hand, a confirmed boarding pass, a paid ticket, a passenger who had done nothing wrong. And she was still looking for a way to avoid conflict instead of standing on the truth. A woman in her 70s, seated across the aisle, finally spoke. Her name was Ruth Ann Hale, silver hair pinned neatly, reading glasses perched on her nose. "Excuse me," she said, but I watched this whole thing happen. That young man showed his ticket the moment he was asked. She didn't show anything but attitude. Diane spun toward her. This isn't your business. It became my business, Ruth Ann said. The moment you decided being loud was the same as being right. A murmur moved through the cabin, small but real. Renee, caught between a passenger with volume and a passenger with the truth, made the choice that so many people make under pressure, the easy choice instead of the right one. Sir, she said to David, would you be willing to move to economy as a courtesy? We'll refund the fare difference and offer you priority boarding next time. David looked at her, and for the first time, something shifted in his expression. Not anger, disappointment, the particular exhaustion of a man who has had this exact conversation more times than he can count, in more rooms than he can list. No, he said. I won't, Renee's radio crackled. I'll need to call the lead purser, she said, stepping away. The captain's voice came over the intercom moments later. Ladies and gentlemen, we're addressing a brief seating matter before departure. Thank you for your patience. A brief seating matter. David almost laughed. That was how these things always got named, small, tidy words wrapped around something much bigger. 2 more crew members arrived. The lead purser, a stern man named Gregory Ford, and a gate supervisor summoned from the jet bridge, a woman named Patricia Nunez, tablet in hand, voice clipped and official. Gregory looked at David the way Kayla had, sweater, duffel bag, reading glasses, and reached his conclusion before reaching the facts. Sir, I understand there's a seating dispute. I'll need you to gather your things. I have a confirmed boarding pass for this seat, David said, holding it up again. Nobody has disputed that. They've simply decided it doesn't matter. We have policies for premium customer satisfaction, Gregory said. Policies don't override paid tickets, David said. His voice was still calm, but there was iron underneath it now. If you remove me from a seat I legally purchased because another passenger is louder than I am, that's not policy. That's discrimination, and every phone in this cabin is recording it. The college student in row 3 froze, phone still raised. Her name was Maya Ruiz, 20 years old, terrified but unwilling to lower her hand. On her screen, the view count kept climbing. 40, then 90, then 200, people tuning in from cities she'd never visited, watching a man defend a boarding pass in real time. Patricia stepped in. Sir, if you don't cooperate, we'll need to involve airport security. David set down his notebook slowly, deliberately. Before you call anyone, he said, I need you to be absolutely certain you understand who you're calling security on. Gregory's face hardened. Is that a threat? No, David said. It's a mercy. I'm giving you one more chance to check the facts before this becomes something none of you can walk back. Security arrived 4 minutes later, 2 officers, calm-faced, trained to de-escalate first and judge second. The older one, Officer Reyes, looked at the scene. A seated man holding a boarding pass. A standing woman with her arms crossed, a crew visibly rattled. What's the situation? Reyes asked. Passenger refusing to relocate, Gregory said quickly. Reyes turned to David. Sir, can I see your ticket? David handed it over without a word. Reyes studied it, then looked up. This confirms seat 1 under your name. Has this been verified against the manifest? Patricia's tablet trembled slightly in her hands. We're still confirming. You've had it in your hands for 10 minutes, Reyes said flatly. Diane, sensing the room shifting away from her, raised her voice one more time. This is ridiculous. I am a priority member. I fly this airline every single week. Ma'am, Reyes said. Turning to her, priority status doesn't override another passenger's confirmed seat. For the first time, Diane's certainty cracked. I didn't know there'd been a mistake. I assumed? You assumed, Ruth Ann said from across the aisle, because assuming was easier than checking. David's phone buzzed again. This time he turned it over. On the screen, board emergency line active. Awaiting your update. Patricia, standing closest, saw it. Her breath caught. Board? Emergency line? David looked up at her, calm as still water. I think it's time I show you something. He reached into his jacket and withdrew a black leather credential case. Inside was his government ID, and beneath it, a corporate badge stamped with the crest of Meridian Airways. The same crest printed on the safety cards tucked into every seat back in that cabin. Patricia's face went pale. David Coleman, she read aloud, barely a whisper. Founder and Chief Executive Officer, Meridian Airways. The cabin went completely silent. Gregory's mouth opened, then closed. Diane took an unconscious step backward, her sunglasses sliding off the top of her head and clattering, unnoticed, onto the armrest. That's not possible, Gregory said weakly. It is, David said. I fly commercial, in coach and in first, without announcing myself, because I want to know what my airline actually feels like for the people who fly it. Today I found out nobody moved. Somewhere in the cabin, Maya's phone kept recording, her hands finally steady, as if the truth itself had settled them. David stood, slow and unhurried. He looked first at Diane. You assumed the seat belonged to you because it usually does. That's not a mistake. That's entitlement, and today it had a witness. Diane's mouth trembled. I didn't know who you were. That's not a defense, David said gently. That's the problem. My worth shouldn't have depended on my title. He turned to Kayla, who was fighting back tears. You looked at my sweater before you looked at my ticket. I'm sorry, Kayla whispered. I believe you, David said. But sorry doesn't undo the decision. It only tells me you know it was wrong. He turned to Gregory. You threatened to remove a paying passenger without verifying a single fact in front of 40 witnesses with cameras. That's not customer service. That's a failure of basic fairness. Gregory said nothing. There was nothing left to say. David faced the cabin. This was never really about a seat, he said. It was about who gets believed without proof and who has to prove everything just to be treated like they belong. Today I had the power to make you check the facts. Most people who go through this don't. Officer Rios stepped forward. Sir, do you want us to remove the passenger? David glanced at Diane one last time, not with cruelty, but with a kind of tired clarity. That's the airline's decision, not mine anymore. I'd rather see this handled through real accountability than a scene in an aisle. Patricia, hands still trembling, nodded. We'll be reassigning Ms. Whitfield and reviewing this flight's crew conduct immediately. Sir, I am so sorry. Don't apologize to me, David said quietly. Apologize by fixing what let this happen in the first place. He sat back down in seat 1A, the same seat, but the air around it had changed completely. 20 minutes later, a new crew boarded. The lead flight attendant, a calm older woman named Carol, walked straight to Mr. Coleman, she said. On behalf of everyone who still believes we can do better, welcome aboard. David nodded. Thank you. As the aircraft pushed back and climbed into the evening sky, Ruth Ann leaned across the aisle. You handled that with more grace than I would have, she said. David looked out at the clouds. Grace isn't the same as forgiveness, he said softly. I just didn't want anger to be the only thing they remembered. That's the story of Flight 2214. David Coleman didn't need to raise his voice. He didn't need to threaten anyone. He simply refused to disappear quietly, and that refusal was enough to expose everything underneath it. At 35,000 feet, everyone wears the same seatbelt. It's character, not comfort, not status, not who shouts the loudest, that decides who we really are when nobody thinks they're being watched. If this story meant something to you, hit subscribe. There's always another flight and always another lesson waiting in it.